Alright, let's dive into the power of asking questions. This is seriously important. Honestly, once you become an adult, whether or not you can ask good questions becomes a matter of survival, something you experience time and time again. Because, when you're talking to someone important, at a crucial meeting or a vital interview, there are times when you just can't come up with a good question and things just don't click. You think, ugh, what a pathetic waste. I just blew this amazing opportunity. I bet that's happened to a lot of people, whether you can do this or not. Someone like Ikigami-san, when someone says, "That's a good question," it's practically a catchphrase, and it makes you happy to hear it. Even celebrities crave it. If you ask Ikigami-san a question and he says, "That's a good question," you're thrilled. Conversely, there are times when you ask a silly question and think, "Did I just ask a stupid question?" Or when you watch a press conference, an idol retiring, an apology press conference, all sorts of conferences, and you see a reporter ask a question and you think, "What is this reporter doing? That's such a dumb question. All they're trying to do is provoke them." Sorry for the harsh language, but it's a real problem. You can see it from the outside, but when it's your turn to ask a question, you freeze. I wanted to learn more about the power of questions. I felt that way myself. And then I found something. When you search for the power of questions, you find tons of resources. I searched high and low, carefully selecting, until I found the gold standard. When it comes to the power of questions, this particular resource is outstanding. It was perfectly suited that it highlighted the difference between a good speaker and a good listener. I really thought, I've found a masterpiece. Actually, it was released a while ago, but copies are still being sold, and it continues to be read. It's a true classic. I highly recommend checking it out. I want to give you my take on it. First, think about it, and then, if you want to know more, check it out. Please listen. Before we talk about the power of questions, let's talk about the power of listening. We've covered that quite a bit. In other words, Stephen Covey. Business materials emphasize that you can't just talk all the time. You can't influence people if you're just talking about yourself. The best communicator is someone who can listen to others. That's something I've often talked about, this ability to listen intently. Recently, I've been consciously trying to do that when I have conversations, saying, instead of immediately jumping in with, "Yeah, I have a similar story." Instead of saying, "So, it's like this, right?" I try to just listen. Like with Mr. Horia. He's tough. In our first conversation video, it was all, "So, it's like this, right?" No, it's not. It was almost like a fight. But the next time, I really focused on listening intently. And the comments section was flooded with, "The speaker is a good listener. Horia-san seems to be enjoying talking." I was so glad I had focused on listening. But even then, there were times when I thought, I could have asked more. Especially with someone like Horie-san, who often does YouTube live streams where he says, "I'll answer any question." Sometimes he even tells his online salon members, "Ask me anything." But even though he says, "Ask me anything," when you watch those live streams, he's often getting annoyed. What is this question? What kind of question is that for this program? He immediately dismisses them, saying, "What are you going to do with that information?" He gets all red in the face and angry, yelling, "Eat your vegetables!" He ends up getting angry about something completely unrelated. So I jokingly said to him, "You can't get angry at questions." And he said, "The questions are bad." And I thought, well, yeah, But even though I understood why he was getting angry, I still didn't know what makes a good question. The power of questions is built on top of the power of listening. First, you have to create a receptive environment, like a catcher ready to receive. But a catcher can't just receive. They have to receive and then throw the ball back in a way that makes the pitcher want to throw even more. That's the key. Is it a return that makes them want to throw again? Or is it a weak return that just rolls away? There are different levels of questioning ability. You need to understand that first. Honestly, I was blown away by that idea. I'd always thought that there were different levels of questions. I used to do a lot of speaking engagements, and there was always a Q&A session. There were always questions that got everyone excited, and questions that made me think, oh no, not this question. It felt like there were good questions, bad questions, and average questions. And I had a hypothesis about what made a bad question bad. So, when I read that there are levels, like a martial art with white belts and black belts, and that it can be clearly explained, that there's a clear reason why one question is bad and another is good, I thought, I need to read this. This is exactly the kind of resource I've been looking for. So, what's an example of a bad question? An overly abstract question, right? It's scary when someone asks a vague question after someone pours their heart out on stage. Like after a performance, you get asked, how did it go? What can you even answer? It's too broad. Or, what does comedy mean to you? When you only have 15 seconds left to answer. What does comedy mean to you? What is love? How's it going lately? Is another one that throws me off. Those kinds of questions are difficult. Also, overly personal questions are annoying. I love peanuts. I carry them around with me every day. I eat 10 peanuts a day. My family calls me Mr. Peanut. Do you like peanuts? I don't care. Most people don't eat that many peanuts. You're the only one who cares. Why did you spend a minute and a half telling us the story of how you became Mr. Peanut? We don't have time for that. You wasted everyone's time with your peanut story. Or people who ask a question but really just want to share their own opinion. What do you think about this? Well, I think it's like this, but they just want to talk about themselves. They're just using the question as a springboard to share their own opinions. There are all sorts of bad questions, but today I want to think about them more deeply. To do that, let's focus on the questions themselves, not the answers. Let's get into the habit of doing this. That's interesting. Usually, the answer is the main focus, right? There's an interviewer and an interviewee, and the interviewee is the star. People pay attention to what they say, not what the interviewer is asking. For example, at a meeting, everyone's asking questions and someone says something brilliant. So, everyone focuses on what the leader said, but the person who asked the question that sparked that great response is overlooked. Let's start paying attention to that person. If an interviewee is giving an amazing answer, let's focus on the interviewer. Let's start thinking that way. Good answers are, of course, worthy of attention, but the power of questions begins with focusing on the questions that elicit those good answers. I've never thought about that before. But if there are levels, and we can figure out why this particular conversation was so engaging, if we can determine whether a level 1 question or a level 10 question was asked, then we can learn to ask better questions ourselves, right? The power of questions isn't just for special interviewers or highly motivated business people. It's essential for growth. When do you grow the most? when you're talking to people at your own level, people below your level, or people above your level. Of course, you learn the most when you're talking to people who are more knowledgeable than you. You think, "I've never thought about things that way," or "I've never had that experience." When you have a realization like that, a third eye opens and you think, "I should try that." That kind of learning and growth comes from interacting with people who are superior to you. And whether or not you can have those kinds of interactions depends on your ability to ask good questions. In other words, whether or not you can draw out knowledge and experiences from people who have more than you depends on your ability to ask good questions. If you can't, you'll be met with boredom or dismissiveness. You won't get a good answer. Why is that? You might think that if someone is a good chef, they'll always serve you the same delicious dish. You might think that if someone is amazing, they'll always tell you amazing stories. But that's not true, because speakers always adjust to the level of their audience. That's the key. Of course. If you ask a child what they think about current politics, an adult isn't going to give a detailed explanation of tax rates and laws. They're just going to say, "Well, yeah, politics are important, so everyone should vote." They'll summarize it and change the subject, because they assume that's all the child can understand. Someone who's exceptional can throw a fast ball, but they can also throw a slow pitch. But if they think the catcher is going to fumble the fastball and let it roll away, they're going to throw a slow, looping pitch. So, if you ask a bad question and they think you're a weak catcher, they're going to throw you a weak pitch and be done with it. If you want to hear truly interesting and meaningful things from someone who's exceptional, you have to show them that you're a capable catcher. Only then will they give you a good answer. Someone who can get a truly intimate and revealing interview with a top-tier artist is truly amazing. They open up the heart of Michael Jackson, hear a story, etc. Those people are clever, capable, and leave their mark on history. They even get to publish resources. But if an average person runs into Michael Jackson and says, "Wow, it's Michael Jackson. How are you so good at singing?" he's just going to say, "You can be too," and walk away. That's the key. If you want to grow, you absolutely need to develop your questioning skills. Even if you finally get a connection and get to meet someone amazing, and you only get to ask one question, it'll be worth it. But don't give up. You can improve if you work at it. The power of questions is not a talent or a gift. If you understand the mechanism of questioning, you can check yourself. Ah, this is a good question. This is a bad question because. You can check yourself, choose the best question from the ones you've prepared, and ask it. That's what's interesting. It's something you can check yourself. If you understand the mechanics, you can evaluate your own questions. You can choose the best question to ask. This idea is really interesting. For example, there are interactive activities where students are grouped into teams, and each team gives a presentation on a topic they like. Then the other teams ask questions. After the questions, the presenter chooses the best question. The competition is to see which team can ask the best questions. This is interesting because it focuses on evaluating the quality of the questions. The presenter, not the audience, decides which questions are good or bad. That makes the activity very engaging and highlights the art of questioning. There is also the concept of meta-discussion. Meta means one level higher. Instead of participating in a discussion, a group of people observe the discussion and take notes. They look at what topics are being discussed and who is asking the questions that drive the discussion. This allows you to see the discussion from a higher level. Analyze a discussion from a bird's-eye view to see who is making the meaningful contributions. Another tip is to analyze interviews and discussions from TV shows and books. Examine the questions that were asked and identify the questions that led to interesting answers. The key to good questioning is to be specific and essential. To be able to do this, you must consider both the questioner and the questioned. Use the questions, "Is it important to me?" and "Is it important to them?"